Keiona Wilson was found shot inside a car. It was just outside the Madison Police Precinct. Investigators tell us she was actually shot inside a home on Scalf Drive.
At 5:45 a.m. on August 25th, 2025, a woman stumbled out of a car at the Madison Police Precinct in Nashville, Tennessee. Blood soaked through her shirt. She'd driven herself there with a bullet in her abdomen. The officer who found her immediately called for medical assistance. Within hours, 42-year-old Keiona Wilson would be dead at Skyline Medical Center. But here's what the initial reports didn't tell you. The woman who convicted felon with an illegal firearm. She had multiple felony convictions. She wasn't legally allowed to own a firearm. Yet when Keiona Wilson knocked on her door that morning, Keosha Greer had a loaded gun ready. And she used it twice. This case has been covered by local Nashville news, discussed on social media, debated in comment sections. But today, we're going to examine it through a different lens. Not just as another love triangle gone wrong, but as a case study in how multiple systems and decisions intersect to create tragedy. We have the police reports. We have the witness statements. We have the social media posts that documented a marriage's final days. We have court records that show a pattern of violence. What we're going to do over the next hour is piece together not just what happened, but examine each decision point that led to that fatal morning on Scalf Drive. Because this isn't just about Keiona Wilson's death. It's about the circumstances that made that death almost predictable. A convicted felon with an illegal firearm. A husband whose affair was apparently an open secret. A wife who chose confrontation over self-preservation. Each element alone might not have led to tragedy. Together, they created a perfect storm. The Metro Nashville Police Department's press release was clinical in its description. But behind those measured words lies a story of betrayal, desperation, and violence that speaks to larger issues in Nashville, a city where the violent crime rate consistently ranks above the national average. We're going to examine the documented timeline of events from that morning. The surveillance footage that captured the verbal confrontation. The two gunshots, one a warning that went unheeded, one that proved fatal. The desperate drive to find help. And we're going to ask questions that haven't been answered. How long had Amadea Wilson been involved with Keosha Greer? How did Keiona discover the affair? Why did she choose that particular morning to confront her husband's girlfriend? But most importantly, we're going to examine how a woman with a documented history of violence, including attempted murder charges, was able to possess a firearm in direct violation of federal and state law. Because that single fact might be the most important element of this entire case. The public record of Keiona and Amadea Wilson's marriage exists primarily through social media posts. These digital breadcrumbs tell a story, though perhaps not the one the couple intended to tell. 5 years before her death, Keiona Wilson posted a lengthy anniversary message. The full text reads, "On this day 5 years ago, we started our journey to forever. This has been an amazing experience that I wouldn't trade for the world. You have been my rock through the good times and my support through the bad. You have showed me a true example of a great partner, dad, man, and friend. Thank you for truly adoring me every day from the beginning and each day forward. I love you, Amadea Wilson, and happy anniversary." The language is telling. Journey to forever. Wouldn't trade for the world. True example of a great partner. These aren't just expressions of love. They're declarations of permanence, of a woman who saw her marriage as the defining relationship of her life. Amadea Wilson's social media presence was less effusive, but still present. He posted birthday wishes to his beautiful wife, Keiona Wilson. The posts appear loving, normal, unremarkable. Nothing in these public declarations suggested what was happening behind closed doors. We don't know exactly when Amadea Wilson began his relationship with Keosha Greer. The police report describes it as a dating relationship, but provides no timeline. What we do know is that by August 25th, 2025, the relationship was established enough that Amadea's car was regularly at Greer's residence on Scalf Drive. Established enough that Keiona knew where to find it. Established enough that she had been driven to take action. The transformation from those anniversary posts to that morning's confrontation represents a collapse that happened largely out of public view. The social media posts stopped. The declarations of love disappeared. In their place, a silence that would only be broken by police sirens and news reports. Keosha Greer, 42 years old, the same age as Keiona Wilson. That's where the similarities end. Court records reveal Greer's criminal history included charges for attempted first-degree murder. The legal system had already determined she was capable of trying to kill another person. She had been through the courts, faced judgment, and been released back into society with restrictions, including the prohibition on possessing firearms that applies to all convicted felons. This wasn't ancient history. These weren't juvenile mistakes. This was an adult woman with a documented pattern of violence. When Amadeo Wilson became involved with her, did he know about her past? Did he warn his wife? Did he consider the danger he might be creating by connecting these two worlds? The address on Scalf Drive in Madison, Tennessee, where Greer lived, was in a working-class neighborhood. Not the kind of place where gunshots would be unusual enough to immediately draw attention. Nashville's Madison area has struggled with crime for years. The Madison precinct that Keiona would desperately drive to that morning regularly deals with shootings, domestic violence, and assault cases. But even in that context, Greer stood out. Her record wasn't just criminal, it was violent. Attempted murder isn't a charge that comes from bad checks or drug possession. It comes from trying to end someone's life. And yet, she had a gun in her home on August 25th, 2025. The timeline of August 25th, 2025 begins in darkness. Nashville in late August sees sunrise around 6:30 a.m. When Keiona Wilson arrived at Scalf Drive, the neighborhood was still asleep. Street lights provided the only illumination. Most residents were still in bed, unaware that a tragedy was about to unfold on their street. According to the Metro Nashville Police Department's report, Keiona first located her husband's car. It was parked behind Greer's residence, hidden from street view. This detail matters. The car wasn't brazenly parked in front. It was behind the house, suggesting an attempt at discretion. But Keiona found it anyway. She had a key to her husband's vehicle. Think about that for a moment. The trust that represents. Married couples share keys, share vehicles, share lives. That key was a symbol of their union, their partnership. And Keiona used it to move Amadeo's car from behind the house to the front. This wasn't a subtle action. Moving the car was a declaration. It said, "I know you're here. I know what's happening. I'm not hiding from this anymore." It was deliberately provocative, designed to force a confrontation. After moving the car, Keiona approached the front door and knocked. The police report notes after some time passed before any response. We can imagine those moments. Keiona standing at the door in the pre-dawn darkness, knowing her husband was likely inside, waiting for someone to answer. When the response finally came, it wasn't the door opening. It was a voice through the home surveillance system speaker. Modern technology mediating an age-old confrontation. Keosha Greer spoke to Keiona through the doorbell camera system, maintaining physical distance while engaging verbally. The police report describes what followed as a heated argument conducted through the speaker system. Two women, separated by a door and speaking through technology, arguing about whether Amadeo Wilson was inside the home. We don't have a transcript of this conversation. We don't know the exact words exchanged, but we know it escalated. At some point during this verbal confrontation, Keiona attempted to force her way into the home. The police report uses the specific term, forcibly enter. This wasn't knocking becoming pounding. This was an attempt to breach the entrance to Greer's residence. And then came the first shot. Greer fired through the storm door. The bullet missed Keiona, but the message was clear. This was a warning shot in the most literal sense. A bullet fired to say, "Stop, go no further, leave now." Any reasonable person would have retreated at this point. A gun had been introduced to the situation. A shot had been fired. The danger was no longer theoretical. But Keiona Wilson didn't retreat. Somehow, despite the warning shot, Keiona gained entry to the residence. The police report doesn't specify how. Did she break down the door? Did Greer open it? Did the first shot damage the lock? We don't know. What we know is that Keiona got inside. What followed was described as a physical struggle between the two women. two 42-year-old women fighting in the early morning hours of a Monday in August. Fighting over a man who, according to all reports, wasn't even present. Keiona Wilson was somewhere else while two women fought in a house on Scalf Drive. During this physical altercation, Greer fired a second shot. This one found its target. The bullet struck Keiona in the abdomen. Abdominal gunshot wounds are particularly dangerous. They damage multiple organs, cause severe internal bleeding, and require immediate medical intervention to survive. But Keiona didn't collapse. She didn't surrender. Somehow, with a bullet in her abdomen, she managed to exit the house. She made it to her husband's car, the same car she had moved to the front of the house minutes earlier. She got in. She started the engine. And she drove. Picture this scene. A woman with a gunshot wound to her abdomen, bleeding profusely, trying to drive through the streets of Madison, Tennessee. Every turn of the steering wheel would have caused agony. Every bump in the road would have been torture. But she drove. She didn't drive to a hospital. Skyline Medical Center was arguably closer than the Madison precinct. But she drove to the police. Perhaps she wanted to report what happened. Perhaps she simply saw the precinct and knew there would be help there. Perhaps it was the closest place she could think of where someone would definitely be present at 5:45 in the morning. The officer she flagged down immediately recognized the severity of her injury. The call for medical assistance went out immediately. Paramedics responded. They transported her to Skyline Medical Center, but the damage was too severe. The blood loss too great. The trauma too extensive. Keiona Wilson was pronounced dead at the hospital. She became a statistic in Nashville's violent crime data. Another shooting victim. Another domestic violence fatality. Another life ended by a bullet. The Metro Nashville Police Department's homicide unit took over the investigation. Detectives arrived at Scalf Drive to process the scene. They found the storm door with the bullet hole from the first shot. They found evidence of the struggle inside. They had Greer's surveillance system, which had recorded at least audio of the confrontation. Keosha Greer was present when police arrived. She didn't flee. She didn't hide the weapon. According to the police report, she acknowledged firing both shots. Her initial claim was self-defense. A woman had forced her way into her home. She had warned her with the first shot. When that didn't stop the intrusion, she shot in self-defense during a physical altercation. From a legal standpoint, this created a complex situation. Tennessee has strong self-defense laws. The Castle Doctrine allows residents to use deadly force to protect themselves in their homes. On the surface, Greer's actions could fall under this protection. A person had forcibly entered her home. She had tried to warn them off. She had shot during a physical struggle. But there was one major problem with this self-defense narrative. Keosha Greer wasn't legally allowed to have a gun in the first place. Federal law is unambiguous. The Gun Control Act of 1968, specifically 18 U.S.C. Section 922G, prohibits anyone convicted of a felony from possessing a firearm. This isn't a suggestion. It's not a guideline. It's federal law, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Tennessee state law mirrors this federal prohibition. Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-17-1307 makes it a Class B felony for someone with a felony conviction to possess a firearm. The penalties can include 8 to 30 years in prison. Keosha Greer had been convicted of attempted first-degree murder. She was absolutely, unequivocally prohibited from possessing a firearm. Yet when police responded to Scalf Drive, they found her with a gun she had just used to kill another person. The district attorney's office was consulted immediately. The complexity of the case was apparent. Yes, Greer had shot someone. Yes, that person had died. But the person had forced their way into Greer's home. The traditional analysis of self-defense would need to be balanced against the illegal possession of the weapon used. After consultation, a decision was made. Greer was arrested, but not for murder or manslaughter. She was arrested for being a felon in possession of a firearm. The shooting itself remained under investigation, with no immediate charges filed for Keiona's death. As news of the shooting spread through Nashville, the public reaction was swift and divided. On social media, debates raged about who was at fault. Some defended Greer's right to protect her home, illegal gun or not. Others pointed out that Keiona was unarmed and that the response was disproportionate. But there were larger questions that needed asking. How did Keosha Greer obtain a firearm despite her felony record? Did she purchase it illegally? Did someone provide it to her? How long had she possessed it? These questions matter because they speak to the broader issue of illegal firearms in the hands of prohibited persons. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, an estimated 287,000 prohibited persons attempt to purchase firearms each year and are denied through background checks. But this only accounts for attempted legal purchases. The black market for firearms means that motivated prohibited persons can still obtain weapons, as apparently happened in this case. There was also the question of Keiona Wilson's role in all of this. Where was he that morning? Did he know his wife was going to confront Greer? Had he been warned about Greer's violent past? The police reports don't indicate he was interviewed as part of the initial investigation, though he surely would be as the case progressed. As news of Keiona's death spread, her social media profiles became digital memorials. Friends and family posted tributes. Photos of happier times were shared. The same platforms where she had once celebrated her marriage became spaces of mourning. Comment sections filled with debates about the case. Some blamed Keiona for going to Greer's house. She shouldn't have gone there, they wrote. You don't go to another woman's house. Others focused on Amadeo's role. Where was the husband? Why is nobody talking about the man who caused all this? The racial dynamics of the case also generated discussion. All three principals, Keiona, Amadeo, and Keosha, were black. Some commentators noted how differently the case might have been covered if the racial dynamics were different. Others pointed to the case as an example of how violence within black communities often receives less media attention than interracial violence. Local news coverage was limited to brief reports. No major national outlets picked up the story. It was treated as a local crime story, not a national tragedy. This despite the compelling elements: a love triangle, an illegal firearm, a convicted felon, a death that might have been prevented at multiple points. Keiona Wilson's death fits into a larger pattern of intimate partner violence and its adjacent casualties. According to the Violence Policy Center, Tennessee consistently ranks in the top 10 states for women murdered by men. In 2023, the state had the 5th highest rate of women murdered by men in the nation. But this case has an unusual element. Keiona wasn't killed by her intimate partner. She was killed by her partner's other intimate partner. This type of violence, sometimes called triangle violence, is less studied than direct intimate partner violence, but follows similar patterns. Research by criminologists shows that confrontations between romantic rivals rarely end in death, but when they do, several factors increase the risk: presence of weapons, history of violence by any party, and situations where one party feels cornered or trapped. This case had all three elements. The presence of the firearm transformed what might have been a verbal confrontation or even a physical fight into a homicide. Studies show that domestic disputes are 5 times more likely to be fatal when a gun is present. That statistic assumes legal gun ownership. When the gun is illegally possessed by someone with a violent history, the danger increases exponentially. How does someone with an attempted murder conviction obtain a firearm? This question goes to the heart of gun control effectiveness in America. The system relies on multiple checkpoints, all of which failed in this case. First, there's the point of sale. Licensed firearms dealers are required to run background checks through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, NICS. Greer would have been flagged immediately. So either she obtained the gun before her conviction, she used a straw purchaser, or she bought it through an illegal channel. Second, there's supposed to be monitoring of prohibited persons. But in reality, there's little proactive enforcement. Law enforcement agencies don't regularly check whether prohibited persons have disposed of firearms they owned before their convictions. They don't conduct routine checks on whether felons have acquired new weapons. Third, there's the issue of reporting and investigation. If someone knew Greer had a gun and failed to report it, they might bear moral, if not legal, responsibility for what happened. But there's no indication anyone knew about the weapon before August 25th. Beyond the legal questions and systemic failures, there's the human cost of this tragedy. Keiona Wilson was 42 years old. She had family who loved her, friends who cared about her, a life that extended far beyond her role as Amadeo's wife. The tributes posted after her death painted a picture of a woman who was loved by many. "She didn't deserve this," one friend wrote. "She was just hurt and wanted answers." Another posted, "Keiona was a good person who got caught up in a bad situation." But there's also Amadeo Wilson, who lost his wife and potentially his girlfriend to violence. Whatever his failings as a husband, he now has to live with the knowledge that his actions contributed to this tragedy. His infidelity didn't pull the trigger, but it created the circumstances that led to that morning on Scalf Drive. And there's Keosha Greer, who now faces years in prison for illegal firearm possession and potentially for manslaughter or murder if additional charges are filed. Whatever her claims of self-defense, she took a life. That's a burden she'll carry regardless of the legal outcome. Many questions remain unanswered. The district attorney's office continues to review whether additional charges will be filed against Greer. The decision hinges on complex legal questions about self-defense, proportional force, and the impact of the illegal firearm possession on her claim of justifiable homicide. There's also the question of whether anyone else bears legal responsibility. Could Amadeo Wilson face any charges related to the incident? Could whoever provided Greer with the firearm be prosecuted? These questions may never be publicly answered. What we do know is that the investigation revealed surveillance footage from Greer's doorbell camera captured audio of the confrontation. That audio could be crucial in determining whether Greer's response was proportionate to the threat posed by Keiona. But that audio hasn't been released to the public and may never be unless the case goes to trial. What can we learn from Keiona Wilson's death? First, that confronting a romantic rival is dangerous, especially when you don't know their history or capabilities. Keiona couldn't have known about Greer's attempted murder charge, but even if she had, would it have stopped her? Betrayal and hurt can override self-preservation instincts. Second, that illegal firearms in the hands of prohibited persons pose a clear and present danger to public safety. Greer shouldn't have had a gun. If she hadn't had one, Keiona might still be alive. A physical fight between two women in their 40s might have resulted in injuries, but probably not death. Third, that warning signs are often ignored until it's too late. That first shot through the storm door was the clearest possible warning. Leave now or risk death. But Keiona pushed forward anyway, driven by emotions that overruled logic. Fourth, that the person most responsible for creating dangerous situations often escapes consequences. Amadeo Wilson's infidelity created this entire scenario, yet he faces no legal ramifications. He wasn't there when the violence occurred. He didn't fire the gun, but his choices set everything in motion. The conclusion. On August 25th, 2025, at approximately 5:45 a.m., Keiona Wilson died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen. She died after confronting her husband's girlfriend. She died after ignoring a warning shot. She died after forcing her way into another woman's home. She died driving desperately for help, using her last moments to reach the police. Her death was preventable at multiple points. If Amadeo hadn't cheated, if Keiona hadn't gone to Scalf Drive, if she had retreated after the warning shot, if Greer hadn't had an illegal firearm, if. But all those ifs don't change the reality. Keiona Wilson is dead. Keosha Greer faces prison time. Amadeo Wilson is left to live with the consequences of his choices. 3 lives destroyed by a combination of betrayal, anger, and violence. This case isn't unique. Across America, similar tragedies play out daily. Different names, same patterns. Infidelity leads to confrontation. Confrontation leads to violence. Violence leads to death. And too often, illegal firearms turn what might be survivable encounters into homicides. So where does this leave us? What do we do with this information? How do we prevent the next Keiona Wilson from dying on a dark morning in a city somewhere in America? First, we need to recognize the warning signs. If you're in a relationship marked by infidelity and anger, seek help before it escalates. If you're thinking about confronting a romantic rival, remember Keiona Wilson. Remember that you don't know what weapons they might have, what they're capable of, what their history might be. Second, we need to address the issue of illegal firearms. How many convicted felons in your community have access to guns they're prohibited from possessing? How many Keosha Greers are out there, armed despite their violent histories? Third, we need to hold all parties accountable. Not just the person who pulls the trigger, but the person whose actions create violent situations. Not just the person who dies, but the systems that fail to protect them. In the comments below, I want to hear your thoughts. Not about who's to blame, there's plenty of blame to go around, but about how we prevent the next tragedy. How do we break this cycle? How do we stop the next Keiona Wilson from dying? Because somewhere right now, another betrayed spouse is discovering an affair. Another confrontation is brewing. Another illegal gun is waiting in a drawer. Another tragedy is building piece by piece, decision by decision. The question isn't whether it will happen again. It will. The question is whether we'll learn anything from Keiona Wilson's death, or whether she'll just be another statistic, another cautionary tale that goes unheeded, another preventable death that we failed to prevent. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to our channel for more and share it, because someone you know might need to hear it. Someone might be one decision away from driving to their own Scalf Drive. And sometimes hearing these stories is what makes us choose differently. Until next time, remember, the choices we make in anger last far longer than the anger itself. And the person worth fighting for would never put you in a position where you have to fight at all.